Hello and welcome to Sacred Wellness. I am your host, Terry Ann Russell. On this podcast, we honor the power of healing and awakening while we dive deep into what it means to rise from the deepest challenges and we reclaim our wholeness, mind, body, soul, and purpose. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my friend Tanya Bonner, and she's a mindset coach, master NLP practitioner, and founder of Mindset Shift Coaching. She helps women break free from self-doubt, rebuild self-worth, and step into their next identity through her signature Empower framework. With over 20 years experience in the community sector and lived experience navigating grief, resilience, and reinvention, Tanya is passionate about empowering women to rise, not despite of their challenges, but because of them. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I'm so excited to be here, Terry Ann. Thank you for the honor and the
Me
privilege.
too. When we met last time, we talked and talked, and we talked a lot about physical grief. And I know it's not in my sector talked about much about the physical aspect of grief and what it can mean. And I've shared this openly and honestly that after my son passed, I gained 40 pounds right away. And I've really struggled the last 6 years for being able to lose that. And I want to talk a little bit with you about the physical grief and how our nervous system shuts down, what happens to the body. Can you talk a little bit about how grief affected you in a physical way?
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to highlight as well that I found until our conversation recently about the physical impact of grief, how unspoken that was within our community and society, that a lot of people focus in on the emotions associated with grief. And it's so much more than that when you've really experienced such a shock to your whole system. So for me, I really reflected on that conversation a lot, and it was so fantastic just to take the time out to sit in that space about what that really meant for me because I found as soon as I found out about the loss of my partner, my body instantly went into shock. And with that came being physically unwell. I was shaking. Yes, I was visibly upset and couldn't comprehend within my mind what had happened. But what I realized throughout my journey of grief was that there was a real disconnect between my mind and my body and
Mm,
my spirit as well. And I'd never experienced the depths of grief in terms of the physical impact like I did this time around when I lost my partner. I've had lots of experiences of grief, but I really found my body, as I said, there was a real disconnection around my mind and my body. And I would go and lay down to try and go to sleep, and I'd find that my feet were shuffling in bed, just trying to calm my central nervous system. I would be forgetting a lot of things. I would shake. I felt the vibrations within my body as well of the grief because I felt that in some way, because I felt those physical symptoms straight away as soon as I found out that my mind also had to, like, it was
yeah,
sort of like it had to catch up and try and comprehend things. But because of that disconnect, it was really hard to equalize, so to speak,
yeah,
what was actually happening within my body and my mind. And often we talk about being sad and being depressed and being anxious. However, it was so much more than that. And my body really felt the impact of the grief. Like I lost a lot of hair through the grief
yeah.
process as well, just due to the stress. So
Hmm.
I'd find myself, I'd have a shower in the morning and I'd be pulling out clumps of hair. And I was just like, why is this happening to me? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And it was my body's way of really showing the impact that the grief had had on me at that time.
Yeah. I don't think it's talked about enough. I knew nothing, about the physical aspects of what I was going to experience going through grief. And what I found even doing my own research was there was not really a lot written about it either. So what I was going through, I felt a lot of physical pain in my heart and my chest. I couldn't breathe. All of a sudden, I was very healthy. I hadn't been sick in like 3 or 5 years, and all of a sudden I was sick all the time. Same thing as you. I was in bed all the time. At the time, fortunately for me, I had a 9-year-old daughter. So she was able to she's very intuitive. She was able to say, I need your help, come on. And that would sort of pull me out of that. But I don't think that I was able to have my mind be able to be aware enough to connect with my body at that time because I was in such physical pain, like things were hurting and I wasn't sleeping. I was so exhausted, but I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating, but I was gaining weight. And all of these things, it was almost as if like a railway crashed and it came to a breaking point. And, I knew that I had to change the way I was doing something. And even though I did Reiki energy healing and that helped alleviate some of that pain, I don't think I truly fully understood the impact that that would have on my physical aspect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely do. And it was interesting you mentioned the breath because I feel like the breath was such a big part of it. Even now, I recognize the impact that it had on my breath and that it's not regulated. I quite often come from this area in terms of my lungs, and I'm not really taking a deep breath as well.
Yes.
And look, I'd go into panic attacks trying to deal with my grief, and my breath wasn't regulated. And I really had to, and still do now, actually, nearly 3 years on, really had to try and focus in on my breath to be able to help regulate my central nervous system because everything was just so out of whack.
Yeah. Something else I want to dive deep into that is not often spoken about. You had the loss of your partner, so you have children, and they were younger when he passed. I also had a daughter who lost her brother and then lost her father. So she lost her brother at 9, at 13, she lost her father. And what I found through that experience was it was a whole new experience for her, but also for me. Now I was learning to navigate my own grief while going through helping my child go through her own grieving. So that's a whole other topic we can discuss. And I want to dive into that a little today because often we talk about it as almost as two separate things, but it's really more interwoven than that. Wouldn't you agree?
It's so interwoven. At one point, you're there trying to deal with your own grief and really struggling to comprehend what has actually happened, while you've got little people around as well. And in the midst of our grief, we had so much change occurring in our life and so much for my children to actually try and comprehend amongst that change too. And it was really hard on them. However, I made a choice at that particular time because I could see the impact it was having on them. They weren't eating, they were physically unwell too, they were quite anxious, they were fearful. Our whole world had been turned upside down, and there was so much fear, so
Mhm.
much confusion there that they were actually feeling, but just so unable to be able to articulate the words because they
Yes.
simply just didn't have the tools to be able to really say what they were feeling and what was going on for them. So the choice I made at that time was I needed to step back from my work. I was working on the front line with trauma, and I
Mhm.
needed to step back and actually focus in on what mattered. And for me at that particular time, it was survival, and it was my own survival and the survival of my children as well. And we just did things completely different. We
Yeah.
would spend time out in nature. We would spend time doing arts and craft and really focusing in on the small little things that were going to be our building blocks to get back to where we are now. And I tell you what, it's been such a game changer and something I've still continued to do is really just take those times out. And, like this week, we went. my son and I went off fishing instead of going to school that morning.
Oh,
We went off fishing down at the beach, and it was just so wonderful to be able to do that and go, these are the things that really matter
yeah.
in our
I
life.
think it's so important. My daughter, I let her take mental health days and we talk about it often and people are like, you let her take another day off of school? And I'm like, it's necessary because I don't believe, she's been through so much. If she tells me that she's tired, if she tells me that she needs some time, absolutely, I will be there to let her take that time because, you know, it's not something that was talked about when we were young. But now today it's so prevalent. And what I found was you nailed it on the head, is that they don't know how to articulate what they're feeling. And so they have a lot of fear around, well, not only did you go, now is something going to happen to you?
Yeah.
And those questions come up, and those are hard questions to deal with when you're in the midst of your own grief. I always say the hardest thing I had to do was mother while I was navigating the loss of another one of my children, because it's like you have this little one and she's like, oh, full of these questions. Well, are you gonna die? Am I gonna die? Not something I was sort of prepared to speak about at that time, but learning to navigate that. And I think that's one of the things I love about your part in the book and my part in the book that we did with Chris and the empowered grief journey, because we have such different experiences, right? But we come into it and we are all connected in such a beautiful way. And there's such a community in this little group of authors that we have together, right? I mean, you really find people that are really with you and can sort of connect with you in that way. But I want to ask you, because for me, when I started writing that, a lot came up for me again. Did you have a similar experience?
I absolutely did. It was, as much as it was such a wonderful thing to do for me in terms of my healing, it was really hard. I found it really hard going back and reliving all of those moments. I think the biggest realization for me throughout writing that process and definitely reflecting on how I faced the grief and how my children faced that grief was it was really about nurturing your inner child. And I found myself so craving different sensory things like the beach. I found them was very grounding. I'd go and do cold water therapy with the kids, and I felt like all my senses were tapped in at once at that particular time. And it was really about nurturing my inner child to be able to heal myself as a
Yeah.
44-year-old now. But that was a real light bulb moment for me to go, this is the key. I need to heal my inner child and the hurt that I'm feeling within at that time. So it was a wonderful experience writing the book and definitely coming together with like-minded people that know the depths of pain that grief reveals.
Yeah, and it's been an amazing journey. I want to talk to you a little bit about you have been doing amazing. You had a 1,500 day revamp. I mean, I am so inspired by you. But the last 1,500 days, you've been doing something, and I want to ask you, what part of your deep grief had something to do with that, and how sacred was that for you to be able to not only begin it, to go through it, to unlayer all of those other things that are so complicated and interwoven into the grief process, such as inner child stuff. How was that experience for you?
It's been an amazing journey of self-discovery. I think it's been the best gift that I've been able to give myself in my whole life is doing this exercising journey.
Mhm.
And the real motivating factor for me in terms of my grief was my father inspired me so much. He actually had a traumatic brain injury, and the outcome when he had the injury itself, he wasn't supposed to survive that.
Mhm.
However, he did. He was a very stoic and strong man. And one of the things that really helped him at that particular time was movement and moving his body. And I really believe that was such a key in him being able to survive those 7 years post his injury. So, as a part of my grief and attachment, I suppose, to the legacy my father left for me, that really inspired me after having a lot of health complications and nearly losing my own life to really go. I need to be there for my kids. I need to be the best version of myself for my kids and do whatever it takes each day to be able to prioritize myself because I'd never
Yeah.
done that. I'm such a giver and I always give so
Yes.
much to everyone else that I would leave my bucket dry. Like my cup was not half full, it was empty, and I needed to go and actually spend that time on a daily basis to be able to focus in on what I needed to be the best version. And I've learned so much. It's been the most wonderful thing, yet it certainly hasn't been easy on different days. And certainly when it came to the morning after I lost my partner, I woke up and I was an absolute mess. I hardly had any sleep. I woke up to police investigators calling me that morning
Mm.
and uh, trying to comprehend what they were asking me and what had just happened and whether this was just all a bad dream and whether I was going to snap out of it soon. And then I got up and I exercised, and it was certainly the most hardest morning. And
Yes.
many mornings after that, while I was in the depths of my grief, getting up and still keeping those goals at the forefront of what really mattered, because I had this belief that if I just kept on doing it, and if that was the only thing I could do, and certainly on some days it was the only thing that I could manage,
Yeah.
that it was going to be my scaffolding and it was going to be able to help me get through this and really. I suppose I had to dig deep to be able to do it on those days. It was
Yeah.
it was really tough.
I can
But
only
I'm glad I did.
imagine what it was like for you to be able to do that. You touched upon a couple of things and us leaving our cup half empty. I am a total giver and nurturer and lover, and I give so much of myself that I truly was like that as well. And not until my grief journey was I able to uncover all of these things where I had given away my power. I had given I didn't have boundaries that I needed to set. And throughout uncovering that and then going back and writing the chapter in the Empowered Grief Journey, unlayered more stuff for me to look at. And I find this journey is something that is so huge. And if you look at it like that, it can be inundating. But when you break it down to the tiny little pieces, often I think as a society and for people on the outside, they want to heal you, they want to help you, they want to get through this grief. And I don't think grief is a process that you get through, right? I don't think it's something that's healed. I think it shifts and changes, but I think it's meant to teach you. Do you agree?
I do agree. It's really taught me so much. And with the experience that I have as a practitioner, I actually utilize a lot of those tools and I did an emotional release technique on myself because throughout my life, I've experienced a significant level of grief. And I actually went back on my timeline right back to my first experience of death, which was at the age of 4. And that was a really horrific accident where I lost my best friend at the time. And I still remember as a 4-year-old, it was one of my earliest memories being told that, my best friend had died in a tractor accident. So I went back to all of those different experiences that I had leading up to the loss of my partner and really tried to comprehend and understand how I showed up in that space, what grief actually meant to me,
Mhm.
because my belief system was that I didn't handle grief very well. And I think those that were around me at particular times through the experiences I had with death, it was something that I suppose was role modeled and I was conditioned a certain way to actually formulate those beliefs within myself. And I really wanted to be able to, I suppose, look at this experience in a different way. I actually wanted to honor the legacy of my partner and really the love that I shared for him and do it different to what I'd ever done before. Because I think throughout a lot of those experiences, there was a lot of experiences that I probably didn't tend to my grief and how I
Mhm.
felt. And in some ways, it was like an accumulation of all those experiences just hit me when I lost my partner as well. And I really had to try and go back and look at those and say, well, what did I learn from that? How did I feel? What were those people like? What do they mean to me? And how can I then honor all of that in moving forward to really shape the person I am and how I can actually give back and help other people try and understand their own grief too, because too often we just sweep it under the rug. We are expected to just, okay, we've lost someone special to us, we've buried them now, and then we continue. But life is completely different after we lose those that we love. And I think it's so important to honor that with the love that they gave us and that we gave them.
Yes, absolutely. That's so beautifully put. I want to say that I always feel like there's a before you and an after you. And, early on, I have this beautiful connection with my son, but I would understand that, after this beauty would come from this pain. And at that time, I just could not see it. And now I can. But I want to ask you before we finish up today, if I could only do one thing today, I've just lost somebody that's so important to me, and there's just one thing that I can do. What would you recommend? Something for me to start, just to start to get through and to be able to get up out of bed and be able to eat something and just be able to tend to myself a little bit more. I think the grief process is a lot of that for us, especially as women or mothers and going through that process.
I always like to reflect on a toolbox. So, a toolbox for women that we can actually go to and draw on when times are really hard, whether it's through grief or other experiences that we have in life. Because I really think that those circuit breakers or those mummy moments are so important when life is tough. For me, it was about really drawing in on those tools that I had in that toolbox, and it would be the little things that would make a difference, whether it was moving my body to be able to shift my energy, or just going to put some hand cream on, doing some skincare. But it was the little things that really added up to be the big things I found in the end. And just having those little circuit breakers just to recharge and refuel. And sometimes it simply is sitting in the space and sitting
Yeah.
amongst what's going on for you that will make a real difference.
Yeah, for me, it was breathing. I had to learn how to breathe. I had to breathe through sort of what that was I was feeling and going through and really taking a look at what did this mean? Because you go through all the stages of grief and it continues back and forth and in and out and several at some one time maybe. But for me, it was definitely the breath that kept me in that grounded space that I needed at that time for sure. I want to ask, where can my listeners connect with you?
Sure. So on Facebook, I am the mindset coach, Tanya Bonner. And on Instagram, I am at I am underscore Tanya Bonner. And I also have a website as well, which is mindsetshift.com.au.
Okay. And
And
I
I
will.
absolutely love connecting with women. So feel free just to DM me and have a chat.
Yes, and I will put all of those in the show description today. And if you want to reach out to Tanya, I will have all those there for you to see. And I would just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love connecting with you, Terry Ann, and I think what we've brought in the space of the grief community as well with our book is just something that's so special and that can help so many other people in terms of managing their grief and showing a light as well amongst the darkness.
Absolutely. Well,
Mm.
thank you for joining us today, and I will see you next week.